You are listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and as we inch ever and ever so closer to IAAPA, it's IAAPA season, which means it's announcement season for manufacturers. You get to see all the new shiny toys on the show floor in Orlando. As such, we are joined this week by a friend of the podcast, a very special guest, Adam Sandley from Zamperla Rides. Adam, what's going on?
We got a few things going on. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming back. I know you're on the Drunk Riders a couple weeks ago, and we love those guys, but they were very hesitant to give you like friend of the pod status.
Yeah, there's a little bit of hesitation there, yeah.
Yeah, I will lead with it. I don't think there is a more friendlier friend of the pod than Adam Sandy and the Coaster101 podcast.
Well, I appreciate you starting the episode like that. That's a good foot to head out on.
See, I'll send the plaque is in the mail. You'll get it eventually.
Fantastic.
When I make the plaque. But let's start with you. I mean, we're recording this a couple weeks in advance. Obviously, Zamperla going very full steam ahead into the IAAPA Expo, but what's new with you? I know you've got a new dog. You've been doing some world traveling. What's going on in the world of Adam Sandy?
Yeah, it's been pretty busy. I just since Labor Day, I had two pretty big trips. One was I was actually at Golden Ticket Awards for a day. I flew down Saturday morning, was there for 24 hours, then I flew to Europe, flew to London for the European Expo, which was really good. And then stopped by and saw our friends at Sarkanimi, the park up in Finland. They've been a huge just supporter and client of Zamperla's for a long time. They have a lot of our rides. So I just wanted to stop by and see the park while it was in action. And then I went to, I was in Italy after that. We had two sets of clients come. So that was 2 weeks. And then just this last month, I got to go to South Korea and then spent a few days in Thailand for an IAAPA event. And then I actually had flight connections are not great right now. So I had a 12-hour layover in Tokyo. So I actually saw my sister and brother-in-law on the way home. So it was quite a fun trip in Asia.
I love it. That's awesome. That is, I'm so jealous of these travels. And I know you're doing it for work and it's a completely different scenario. But I think down at your core, you would kind of admit to being a coaster enthusiast nerd like the rest of us, and to get to, these parks with lots of vowels in Finland that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, but it's got to be cool to have this as a job and where you can just kind of go and check in on parks where, Zamperla has attractions.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. I'm certainly really lucky to be able to do this. I'm in a unique position at the company where I actually do travel kind of worldwide because we have a fantastic sales team, but they're really regionally oriented. We have two people who handle Asia and a bunch of other people around the world. So they sort of handle their specific markets and are really experts in those areas. And I kind of float between all our sales team members and work with them on coaster specific projects.
I love it. Well, let's get into some of these projects that are upcoming. And you guys, you've made Zamperla history and roller coaster history. You guys are headed to Sandusky, Ohio next year with the addition of Wild Mouse. And we talked to Tony Clark on the podcast a couple of weeks back, and Tony he told us a little bit from the Cedar Point side. Mm-hmm. But Tony, love Tony. He is a marketing and comms guy though. I want to know the nitty gritty, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know the nitty gritty of, how long you guys have been in the talks with Cedar Point, all the stories behind Wild Mouse. What can you tell us about Wild Mouse that, won't get a flag by an NDA that you already signed?
There aren't a whole lot of secrets here. So, I mean, it's, we started talking to them in 19, and this was actually, I think, supposed to be a 20 project. So this was really a little bit before my time. But the goal was some of the same things I touched on when I sort of first came on over a year ago, and that was them thinking about broad appeal rides. They have, everybody knows they got an amazing collection of coasters, but if you look at it, they've got two coasters. I think they have the Intamin and the Vekoma are probably $36, $39 to ride. But then they really jump up. Pretty much the entire collection starts at $48, and then you go kind of way up from there. I'm guessing probably some of the rides like Gatekeeper, maybe $52, $54. So they've got an amazing coaster collection, but it had sort of this hole in the middle. And we're coming in with this ride that's 42 inches to ride. So it's something for everybody. Seasoned coaster enthusiasts are going to have a good time on it, but it's definitely oriented to those families that maybe have their kids sort of aging out of the smaller coasters, or you also have those families that come to Cedar Point or come to any park and they've got the older kid and the younger kid. And what we're seeing now at Zamperla when we talk to our customers is that age gap has grown. Traditionally, it was when I was a kid, it was, I don't know if statistics bear this out, but I think from what I've seen, I saw a lot more families that their kids were spaced a year and a half, 2 years, 2.5 years apart. That was the age range. Now, a lot more families are like my family, where we have a 4.5 year age gap between our kids. And you're just seeing that a lot more, really spacing the kids out if you choose to have more than one. And so we're seeing a lot of parks where they've had the family, but now they have the younger kid coming on, and they need to make sure they've got attractions that are appealing to that younger kid, but still engage the older one, and obviously the parents too. So I think this is really going to hit that sweet spot for them and give them something just that bolsters their already fantastic ride lineup.
I completely agree, and I'm right there with you. My younger brother and I were at that 4.5 year,
Mm-hmm.
almost exactly age gap, and I get that because I remember, when I was younger, we would go. We lived in Florida. We would go to Disney as a kid, and like I would ride stuff, and he would like take a nap, and then obviously we got closer in age, or not closer in age because that's not how math works, but we were able to ride more of the same attractions, and I understand the need for this kind of the 42-inch
Mm-hmm.
height requirement. I want to talk a little bit. It's a newish model. It is a custom. What is the brand name here? Is it a custom twister coaster, or what do we
It
what do
is
we
the
have here?
Twister Freeform.
Okay.
So, we people know us sort of from that classic quote unquote wild mouse layout we had on the Twister coaster. And when EN became a requirement, an engineering requirement, we said, okay, we're going to re-engineer both that classic one, which we call the Twister Classic, pretty
Mhm.
straightforward. But we said, we're toying with the idea of having something that was a little more custom. So the MM1 turn, a good drop on it that wasn't straight, and mix things up. And we were sort of thinking about that process when Cedar Point came to us. And so we just really finalized that concept and worked with them to make sure we could give a great layout in a pretty small footprint.
I love it. And I've got to ask, the cheese car, the mouse in the cheese car, was that a Cedar Point idea, or was that you guys saying, "Hey, this would be really cool if one of the cars was literally cheese"?
That was all creative at Cedar Point. My
Okay.
hat's off to them. And I do love it. And I think it's going to be fun and certainly something that younger kids, I know everyone's going to want to ride the cheese car. I get it. But I think the younger kids are also going to love watching it go around the course. And it's going to just be one of those other little things that at Cedar Point has. They have so many neat little experiences tucked away into the bigger Cedar Point experience. And I think this would just be one more thing that kind of following the cheese or cutting the cheese, whatever you want to call it, is going to be another fun thing at Cedar Point for families. And I just love that they keep coming up these little things as they really reposition the park as more of a long-term stay resort as opposed to just a day trip amusement park.
Yeah, and on the flip side, if nobody wants to ride the cheese car, the cheese stands alone.
There you go.
But
There you go.
and the last question I'm going to ask about this, and I know again you're a enthusiast, geek, historian, however we really want to describe you. You've got a love for the industry.
Hmm.
You're getting to kind of indirectly resurrect a classic coaster at Cedar Point with this new brand. They had a Wild Mouse, different manufacturer, obviously, but opened in the 50s, closed in the 60s. What does it mean to you to kind of be able to kind of resurrect the Wild Mouse brand at a park that for years has not had a true Wild Mouse coaster?
I think it's a lot of fun. I do love the older ones, whether it's the Wild Mouse or I think they had the Wildcat for a long time and also a Schwarzkopf jumbo jet there, I believe. And so, as someone who sort of grew up of that era, I'm a kid of the late 70s. I love sort of that nod to history while still doing things in a modern way. And I think that's what excites me most is I'm not someone who loves to abandon history, but I do think that we can kind of combine what the good ideas of the past with today's technology and create new experiences, but that still sort of harken back to the past. And I think that those can be very successful and a lot of fun when done correctly.
I love it. And we're going to move a little bit to I'm not going to say a lesser known park in the coaster community because the people listening to this podcast, they know the deep cuts. Adventureland in Iowa, and they're the recipient of kind of something new ish that Zamperla has kind of
Hmm.
pushing in recent years, which is an integrated ride. They're getting a super flume, which is known as, I'm going to edit this. Got it. They're getting a super flume, which is known as Draken Falls, and also a roller coaster named Flying Viking. But the thing about these two rides is they're going to kind of not interact, but they're intertwined with one another. What
Yeah.
is what is Zamperla's philosophy on these new kind of integrated rides?
For us, it's really just thinking about maximizing space. I've been lucky enough in my career to work a lot with 555, like at West Edmonton Mall, American Dream, Mall of America, and especially when I visited their two older properties at West Edmonton and Mall of America. I spent a lot of time with Dave Frazier specifically at Mall of America, and he always talked about when he added rides to the park, he didn't think about clearing out an area because obviously they don't have a lot of new areas they can put rides in. They either had to take a ride out or go vertical. So his thought was always, how can we go vertical to add to our footprint? And we've really taken what we've seen that our clients have done, like 555, and brought that into the folds for our collection, essentially. So for Luna Park, it was very much, we have a pretty, for a coaster and a flume, not a huge footprint. But how do we maximize hourly capacity, which means that at that location, maximize revenue? So there, I think we can do over 2,000 people per hour on the flume and the coaster combined. And so for us, that was really exciting, and we thought that could be a good selling point. And Adventureland was a park that they obviously, they're big flume fans there in Altoona and Des Moines. They loved the flume and missed it when it was taken out, and they were also just looking for something. The park was that really kind of leveled down a little bit on the coaster side, because I think underground maybe 42 inches to ride. Then again, you sort of bump up to 48 after that. So this gives them another great first coaster opportunity. And I like it. It's not just a tiny coaster. It's something that's big. It's memorable. It's something that you ride with your parents or grandparents. You're going to get your first coaster picture on. They're building an experience, not just a coaster. And I think that's always a great way to go when you make that choice. So doing the coaster, which is 36 inches to ride, the flume, which is 42, adding all that theming on top of it, now you've got an area where people want to spend time and money and really enjoy themselves. And I think that's what really excites me most about the whole process.
Yeah, and this kind of integrated rides, I don't want to call it a phenomenon. It's getting there. It's going to be the
We're
new.
making it one. We're
I
making it
love
one.
I love it. The new hotness in the amusement industry is these integrated rides. And it was announced back in, 2019, and then obviously the following 2 years what they were, with the whole global pandemic thing that we're still dealing with.
That little thing, yeah.
Yeah, casual. But Tony's Express and the Super Flume at Luna Park, which are owned by Zamperla as
Mm-hmm.
well. How has the reception been? And I know Tony's Express opened fairly recently,
Yeah.
according to RCDB anyway. But how has reception been at Luna Park with the addition of these two new attractions?
It's been really good. For us, we had some smaller coasters there, but again, they were pretty small scale. Not a lot of room at the facility. So again, this is 36 inches. We get, I'd say, almost everybody that wants to ride, we can get on the ride. 36 inches is pretty low. But it's been super satisfying. And I believe the Flume is going to open next year. We've been
Okay.
battling, like a lot of people, just all the challenges of building during the pandemic, like so many of our customers, and working on supply chain issues and things. But everything will be open next year. We're super excited about it. But we've been running the Flume through its paces this fall just to get it ready. And we're thrilled because we think that you can never go wrong by betting on families, and that Coney's got a lot of good thrill rides, but we think this is really going to round out our family offerings and really entice people to stay longer. If you've been on the beach all day, you're going to come and go for do a refreshing ride on the Flume and then cool off even a bit more on the coaster. So we're very optimistic about what this is going to do to help transform the property and again, create experiences that make people want to stay at our park longer.
I love it. And then we can wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because, we're face to face while recording this, but the people listening, they're not going to know. Have there been conversations with other parks that you've talked to about integrated rides coming to their parks in the future? You could just nod your head yes or shake your head no.
I can say yes because yeah, the response has been fantastic. Obviously, with Luna being announced a while ago, the idea has been percolating for a while. So we've been talking to clients about it, and then we also have the really good reference of Ferrari World. So that has we have three attractions there. Two are 36 to ride, one's 42, and then the coaster, which is 36 to ride. And that one was really cool because the park came to us and said, we have pretty amazing coaster collection. If you look at it, they do. It's world class.
Mm-hmm.
But their challenge was, again, extending their length of stay for families. And what they had was some people riding rides like Flying Aces and Formula Rossa, fastest coaster in the world from Intamin. They'd ride those and kind of just check them off and then they'd be done. But what they've found now is when they put our integrated rides package in, they hugely extended their length of stay for families. So what they're finding is they're going to ride all four attractions at least once, probably jump on another flat ride and do the coaster again. So you're getting 5 rides out of those families. And that means when they do that, you're obviously doing more things like doing F&B, buying some merchandise, maybe buying that on-ride photo. So that this is, I think, another good case study, very different audience than what's at Luna or what's at Adventureland, but where the idea works really well. And I think it's exciting because, historically we've built a lot of fantastic flat rides. And now that our coaster, selection is really widened, our coaster quality is improved, instead of coming to us for the flat rides and going to someone else for the coaster, we're getting those phone calls where someone's saying, hey, I've got this much to spend. I have a small area, but I want high hourly capacity. How can we achieve that? And we've got the answer, already designed. So it's been a lot of fun to look at that response because our clients have really, really enjoyed the idea of it. And it adds, I think, sort of a kinetic energy to the area that's not already there, because so much of our amusement park planning, and I'm speaking more about the States than maybe Europe or Asia, is because when so many of our parks were built in, like, especially the 1970s theme parks, they were built, really in the exurbs, or what are now the exurbs, way out from the city. They've got space. So it's always, let's push it out a little more. Let's buy a little more land. But they're finding that the guest experience is better and their in-park spending is better when they create a little more density. So you're not having that sort of transit time between attractions, but mom or dad, if they don't want to walk, they can park on the bench while the other one goes and does some rides. But you're only 50 or 100 feet away from everybody at all time. You don't even have to go through something as big as a kiddie land. It's all right there. So that really adds to everyone enjoying themselves. And I think, if you think of parks like Silver Dollar City, for example, that, their audience is not just mom and the kids, it's parents, grandparents, and children. And so making all 3 generations have a good time, creating things that they can go on together, makes all of them have a much better day.
I love it. And it makes so much sense when you put it that way. It's, again, if you can keep people in the park longer, they are going to stay and they're going to spend money on merch, spend money on food and beverage. And especially with some of the flat rides that Zamperla is coming out. And I know you're the roller coaster guy, but I would be remiss if I wasn't talking about Zamperla's impressive flat ride collection, which I'm very, very excited. There's a number of Zamperla rides coming to Aeronautica Landing at my home park of Carowinds. Kings Island just announced 2 of their own Zamperla rides. They're just fun to look at. I'm thinking back to my trip to Las Vegas earlier this year, where I went to Circus. God, why, I don't know, because I just do weird things in this hobby. But I'd seen the Nebulas before, the flat ride that you guys have, that they're starting to pop up. Hershey Park's got one, Carowinds got one. It's so fun to just watch. And again, that's another way I think people are going to stay in the park, is just being onlookers, which is just passive amusement for the guests, which is good.
Oh, 100%. When we think about designing rides, 50 years ago, we certainly were not thinking about the people not riding. because like when our company started and the history of our industry, it was really kiddie rides were rides for kids. And then we actually had one of the first attractions that had parents and kids, the Crazy Bus, in the 1990s. And what we've done in the last decade is think about how do we get everyone who comes through the front gate of any park, how do we get them engaged? And our designers, and I know Tim Jacoby really well. He's on our new concepts team, and he's come up with Nebulous was one of his ideas, and he did Big Waves also with our team. And I like them because they do exactly what you're talking about. They engage everyone. So it's the people who ride, it's the people who think they want to ride but want to watch it a little bit, and then eventually get in line. And then it's the person who, and we all have in our family, it could be mom, dad, brother, sister, who says, "No, I'm taking all the stuff. I'm going to sit here with everything." Exactly. I'm the bag holder. I'm bench riding for a half hour while you guys are in line. And
that's my fiance, 100%.
No, really?
Yes.
Not a rider?
Nope, not even a little bit.
and my wife Tomoka, I mean, she'll ride stuff, but she's in no way passionate like I am, But what do? They can go get in line somewhere, but then they may lose you. They can look at their phone, but we all do that way too much energy. And the whole point of going to a park is get outside and enjoy being out. But if you got something like that crazy Nebulous there or an air race, watching the mechanics of that, as well as the guest reaction, is awesome because it really draws you in and it allows them to participate in the day in a way because they get something out of the Nebula. So is it exactly as fun as riding it? No, I don't think so. But there are people who don't need to ride it to enjoy it. They are taking it in as a piece of art, as a piece of architecture, whatever you want to call it. They are internalizing that ride in their own way. And it's become part of their day. And when they leave the park, they're going to be happier with their experience. So when you put all those things together, to me, it just makes perfect sense that the rides we're creating are sort of this unique kinetic motion, that you have. And so we're really trying to incorporate that to our design philosophy. And I think the fun thing about some of these flat rides are we're thinking about design a different way. I look at it as a piece of art or a piece of architecture, not just a ride. And I really do believe that guests are taking away different things from the park. So even if you're that person that's riding the bench that's got 20 bags on them, you're going to still appreciate watching the Nebulous. You're going to still appreciate watching the Big Waves for both what the ride does and the rider reaction and the reaction of people that aren't even on the ride. With Big Waves, they were operating it, they're actually testing it, and they had hundreds of people. They were selling ponchos to all the kids and families who would just run up when it was being raised and run away when the wave was coming down. And when you get that sort of visceral, natural reaction, that's where I know we've just created some real home runs with our attractions, and especially with how the guests engage at a different level in a different way than you would when it's maybe just like a Mangles kiddie ride.
Absolutely. And you're talking about hitting home runs, and if you look at RCDB, there's a coaster you probably can't talk about at a park in Abu Dhabi, but you are ready to break some news right here on the Coaster 101 podcast, depending on when people listen and when you guys actually release your news. But you guys aren't done for coaster announcements for 2023.
No, we're not. We actually have several more in stock. The big one I want to talk to you about was actually our first LSM launch coaster. So it's opening at Playland at PNE, the Pacific National Exhibition. And we are super excited about it. It's going to have our Lightning trains. It's one of a few Lightning coasters that are opening next year. For those who don't know, we've actually been kind of touting the Lightning for a few years. The first one debuted at IAAPA 19. Again, the whole pandemic thing happened, so that sort of put pause on everything. But we brought that vehicle back last year for 21, and then we have essentially the ride-ready vehicle. What is going to be running soon is going to be at the show in Orlando, so guests can sit in it, feel how great the restraints and seats are, look under the hood, check out the craftsmanship on the chassis. It is gorgeous, and really understand this transition that Zamperla has made as a company. And, if you follow me on social media or follow our channels, we've been talking about how we're a different company. Our whole mantra has been, we've created some good coasters, we created some bad ones, but we're changing to be a different company now. And I think no place is that truer than the piece of art or architecture or excitement, whatever you want to call it, that we're bringing to IAAPA Orlando this year.
I love it. And again, your first limb launch, awesome. This is great news. I mean, as someone who loves a really good launch coaster, very exciting. What can you give us the general details? Is this a more family friendly launch, kind of along the lines of something like a backlot stunt coaster, or are we talking like full blown max force?
Yeah, it's going to tilt more toward family than ridiculous thrill. But it's in terms of what PNE wanted. They wanted something that had the marketing pizzazz of that launch coaster, but really cast a wide ridership net, and that's exactly what they're getting. So it is going to be the fastest launch coaster in Canada, so which will be a lot of fun. But it's certainly going to really target everyone that comes to their front gate that's tall enough to ride. They're going to get on. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And, just with everything they already have as a facility, like they've got a great ride collection. They really recently refurbished their wooden coaster, to allow it to keep operating to current standards. And they have a pretty amazing venue. I don't know if anyone's checked it out, but like the top tier acts that come through PNE are crazy. It's sort of everyone on national tour. They also play PNE, and they have an amazing concert lineup. And the coaster is going to go right next to the amphitheater. So it's going to be a really unique placement of the attraction. And it wouldn't surprise me in the future if, basically your favorite musician, there's also a picture of them riding PNE's coaster as part of the promo piece.
I love it. Yeah, that's that celebrity photo. Every time there's a celebrity at Disneyland and the Orlando Sentinel's like, Gwen Stefani's here, and here's her picture with Elsa. And so that is awesome. And I'm just as a fan of the industry in the last couple years specifically, you guys have come up with models. You've got the family lift and launch, our good friend Daddy Pig down at Peppa Pig.
Yes.
But you've got the double heart, you've got the family thrill launch, you've got the junior shuttle, you've now got the limb launch.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are really changing the game right now when it comes to, the new Zamperla. And we talked about this on your first appearance on the Coaster101 podcast. Again, friend of the pod status right now.
Yes.
But I want to go back now. We've had, a year and a half at this point since we kind of talked the first time, and then we talked around IAAPA last year. But how is this kind of evolution of Zamperla? How is it still progressing? Is it right on track to kind of what you guys were envisioning when you were like, we're going to put the industry on its head and change what we do as a company?
Honestly, I would say we're probably a little bit ahead of where I thought we might be. I think some of that has to do with the pandemic. I think people really sat back during the pandemic and rethought about their investment priorities and started thinking about more long-term planning. And since we now can say, if you want a family ride, a thrill ride, a coaster, or a water ride, we can provide that. We've had several conversations with clients talking about their 3 and 5 year plans. So we're actually moving a little bit ahead on the coaster side of where we'd hoped we'd be, which is awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think the transition we've made really comes down to a few people on the ownership side. Alberto Zamperla, and then now Antonio, who's our CEO. They really stepped back and said, we're going to do this right. Because, I think there's a lot of owners who could have said, well, we'll spend a little bit of money and we'll keep it going. Or, good enough is good enough. And they really just said, we're either going to make some of the best coasters in the industry or we're not going to make coasters at all. And I think that I really appreciated that when I was talking about working for them, because, the portfolio is so large, they could have just, not that we would have sold 10,000, we could have kept selling Volaris and moto coasters, no problem, one here or there. But they just said, we want to be one of the best, and how do we pivot to make that happen? And so my hat's off to them for putting their money where their mouth is, essentially, and really reinvesting in the company to make us a player in the coaster space. And then the other person responsible is Alberto Ferri. So he runs the roller coaster division on the engineering side. So all the engineers that we have, all the ideas we have, they all kind of they're from him, or they also obviously bubble up to him because we have a bunch of great designers there who come up with ideas and they talk. But he's really had this vision of the same thing about not just making coasters and pumping out 20 family gravity coasters, but really making some landmark attractions. So the change started before a lot of people in the industry saw it, and that was really in 2016. We took on two big projects: the factory coaster that opened at Wuxi Sunac Land and the Super Twister at Warner Brothers Abu Dhabi. And we really doubled down on making those great rides, and they were both, for us at least, pretty big coasters. And so that's really where I think people started to notice, if they were looking for it, the substantial change. And we've continued to grow with that. Again, a little sidetracked by COVID, but we've been able to really change the product that we put out, the team that we have, and we've also just gone about understanding, I think, what makes a great coaster very differently. Because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we thought of coasters just like we thought of flat rides, because it was really, what are we going to sell you? Are we going to sell you a giant Discovery? Are we going to sell you a teacup? Or are we going to sell you a moto coaster? They're all pretty small foundations, pretty easy to install, pretty straightforward. Yes, the coaster is more complicated, but not worlds apart. But now the roller coaster business unit now is really sort of its own little world in Zamperla. I mean, yes, we use all of Zamperla's resources, but that division kind of has its own team, acts on its own, and is not completely autonomous, but it works within its own world, just because coasters are so different than flat rides are. And so I think from an ownership perspective and a leadership perspective, we've been really lucky. And that's the reason why we're in this place right now, kind of, I think, surprising some people who didn't think Zamperla would be doing these types of coaster projects.
Right. I love it. And I have to ask, I know you can't tell me anything. Again, this is the wink, wink, nod, nudge, whatever we want to do via FaceTime, Zoom, however we're describing this. But these new models, like I mentioned, the Family Lift and Launch, what has debuted, is the winner, as far as I'm concerned, for the 10 best not golden ticket, but best new roller coaster of 2022. But the Double Heart, the Family Thrill Launch, and the Junior Shuttle, those concepts you guys have kind of debuted. And I know the Junior Shuttle was at the IAAPA Expo in Europe that you mentioned you attended. There's had to have been some interest, and I don't think you can tell the drunk riders if you sold any, but if you want to tell us that you sold them, no, I'm kidding. But interest has been good. Yeah.
Interest has been great. Well, and what I can honestly say is, we are in serious conversations about several of those models with clients. But the other thing that it brought was it reinforced the messaging I was giving and our sales team was giving, that we can do more than just moto coasters. And so we're actually working on more custom projects right now than I think we ever have in quite a long time. And so we're not only trying to get those sort of quote unquote standard models going, we're also working on some custom stuff. So our engineering team is very busy. So I can't sit here and say, yes, I've got a Double Heart opening next year. We're thrilled just because of how many coaster orders we've taken in. And when our sort of full lineup for 2023 is shared, you're going to see that it's not like us, selling 10 of the same coaster. They're all actually individual different coaster projects. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is really exciting, is that we're making that transition, and we're certainly still in it. We're not done, but we're making that transition to a company that where I want to be in a couple of years is we've got this great portfolio of standard layouts that we can just go to, like the Double Heart, and others, but also have the engineering capacity to do custom projects too. And that's really where we want to be, is kind of having that tension between having just these rides that are already engineered that we can put into production, but also having some of that engineering time going to custom projects, working on things to build them in spaces where people didn't think a coaster was possible. So that's where really our end goal is.
I love it. That's the siren coming for me for asking the yes. hard questions. Apparently, I want to
hard hitting siren.
Exactly. It's like, hey, don't answer that. We're coming to arrest you. You violated the coaster enthusiast law, whatever. Anyway, before I get into IAAPA, which again, coming up very soon, we're very excited. It's going to be hopefully more of a normal show this year than last year. And then obviously the year before got canceled because of COVID. I want to talk about this mythical IAAPA Concept Park, where all of the concept videos come from, and how there's a double heart in the background, and there's a junior shuttle in the foreground, and there's all these things. Why don't you guys just get into the business of building a park and just blue sky everything, and then just make it a coaster enthusiast paradise based on this, this virtual recreation?
That would be pretty sweet. That would, because I just would love to see the 70-meter double heart realized, because I think that is going to be an insane experience. But yeah, no, we did that because we're talking about what do we put in the background of our coasters? Because do we make them very customer specific? Because some of the ones we're putting up we've sold, but that didn't make sense because we didn't want to feature just one coaster. And then I don't know who suggested on our team, but someone was like, well, why don't we just focus on this great portfolio of attractions that we have? We make the coaster the centerpiece, but we kind of show how they can fit with the other rides and attractions from Zamperla. And that's been I think a really nice artistic background for us as we think about presenting our rides. And again, historically, we did not do a great job of putting out quality animation and really presenting our coaster product in the best light possible. And I think this is just one more way that Antonio, I think, had a lot of input here and influence on again, spending the money and said, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to make a first class video to show how this coaster looks. We're not just going to, export a no limits on a green grass field, even though we do that sometimes when time is short. But for the official things we do, we're going to try and make it first class. So it not only looks good, that buyers can at least get a little bit of a taste of what it might look like situated around other attractions.
Yes. And, I don't know the timing of the video of the limb launch coaster that you did share with me. If people have seen it by now, congratulations, it looks awesome. But there's some really cool interactions with the surrounding area and low elements near the ground that are going to just be stellar to look at. And as someone who takes photographs of roller coasters with some level of regularity, very fun to photograph. So
Yeah, no, I think for that, so that is our PNE project, and
mm-hmm.
and with that, when we talked with them, it was all about placing the rides so that it had a lot of, like we talked about before, off-ride engagement, so that it wasn't just, it is going to be in the corner of the park, but we didn't just want it to sit there and sort of be isolated from the rest of the facility. So they were very insistent that the coast be part of the DNA of PNE. And so they didn't want to just get like an off-the-shelf model, stick in a corner, makes a little money, great. They wanted to say, well, we have this amazing facility with performing arts. We've got all these great flat rides. How do we make this part of the fabric of the experience when you come to PNE and really enjoy it? And so we talked a lot about master planning and ride placement and guest engagement when we were working on this particular ride and making it fit at the park.
Got it. Okay. I know we're running up against a window of time for you, but real quick, what can we expect this year from Zamperla on the IAAPA Expo show floor? If you're allowed to tell me, or I know we're recording this a little bit in advance, but I don't know what the final plans are or what's going on.
So here's what I can share.
Okay.
So we are bringing the lightning train. So that is, as I've said before, I visited, and when I saw it in person, I was blown away. I mean, I had very high expectations for our team, but how many times in life do you have very high expectations for something, even when it's something you love, and it's not quite as good as you want it to be? This thing has exceeded every expectation I had. It looks great. The quality is there. Just the general aesthetic is fantastic, and it's super comfortable. So all of the things that we were working to accomplish, we've certainly exceeded my expectations for all those. So I'm just very excited because the people that come to our booth, especially somebody that's been on a Thunderbolt and knows that vehicle, it is a little high, it's a little clunky, it's a little weird. But when you say, man, the guys who did that are doing the lightning, you're going to be blown away. And even the other stuff that is super important to me, not quite as important to enthusiasts, but the things like the aluminum milled chassis, how we have virtually no welds on it, and it's going to really change the game from a maintenance perspective, and change the kind of the cost parameters that a park thinks about when they think about taking care of a ride. Things like that, when the few clients I've taken over there to look at it, I had one guy in particular who's very high up in maintenance, and he just stared at the chassis, which was all mill machine, and he was just very impressed. So when I get reactions from people like that who are much better at turning wrenches and understanding the mechanics of things than I am, I know we're on the right track. And so I'm really excited for our fans, for our clients to come and see this. And again, not just see it and say, ooh, ah, but get in the seat, feel how the restraint, touches you on your legs and provides great containment while being comfortable. We thought about even the little details like the lines of the seat, like where does that seat need to stop and the padding starts, or where's the contour around your legs so it's more comfortable for as many people on the ride as you can, because obviously you got your smallest riders and your tallest riders, and wherever you put the lip of that seat is going to affect them and how comfortable for the knee curvature. So all those things from the big details on how we created and engineered it, but to all the small stuff like the creature comforts, I think we really hit a home run. So like that's going to be on the coaster side our star. We are bringing 2 other flat rides, and we're also bringing 2 other vehicles, one of which is a coaster vehicle. So it's going to be very fun for people to come see all the different things in our booth. And again, I think the common takeaway is going to be when they see the flat rides, of course, they're going to think that's Zamperla's bread and butter. They're great rides, and I can't wait for people to get on them. But the coaster vehicles are really the things that I think are going to sort of reset someone's frame of reference a little bit when they think about Zamperla, because we have put so much time and effort. And I'm very lucky because I get to be out here sort of the face of this whole thing, talking about all the cool things we're doing. But the fun thing and the fact is that I'm just one of a huge team. We've got over 400 people at the company, and we've invested very much in talent for production people, for engineering teams. And they've really put their heart and soul in this stuff just to try and make it better. And just because that's really been a huge mantra for the company, is creating these things. And really kind of the 3 tent poles of our coaster engineering are now, one, it's got to be a fun ride, first and foremost, that's most important. Second, it has to be something that has a lower cost of ownership. That's something that we put in as a design criteria for all our rides, especially our coasters right now. How do we make things that are easier to take care of and cheaper to take care of than our competitors? And the third thing is kind of what you hit on earlier, that marketing virality. How do we create experiences like the Double Heart that are not just fun rides, but that are great for social media, that are great for your marketing campaign, that are great for that person who doesn't ride, but they want to buy a Coke or a beer, sit on a bench and watch it for 10 minutes while their friends ride it. Those are the 3 things that we're concentrating on for each and every coaster design that we do now. And it's important because we're not just taking a piecemeal approach to this coaster relaunch. We're really thinking about how do we become the preeminent player in this coaster space over the next decade. And we know we're not going to get there by making small incremental change. And that's why, I hopped on as a team member here, because ownership and the engineers that we had really were open to taking everything back to the ground level and saying, what do we have that works? How do we take those good attributes and rebuild a new concept around it? And so that's what I find very exciting, is that we're coming back to all of these new rides with great ride experience, low cost of ownership, and having something that is viral in its kind of very nature. And so I think when you put all those things together and then match them up with what do park owners need right now, I feel like we're really meshing really well with their needs.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to something you said really quick, that, enthusiasts don't care about the cost of maintenance. If you're an enthusiast and you're listening to this podcast, the way parks make capital expenditures is by having money. If they don't have to spend money on maintenance, they have more money. Therefore, more capital expenditures.
There you go.
that's I wasn't an economics major by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there's money that could be earmarked for maintenance that is now earmarked for other things. Just spitballing out there.
Yes, we're always happy if our rides take less time and energy to take care of and less money, and that way they can buy new attractions from us. It's a circle of life.
Exactly. I love it. Adam, I want to thank you so much. Again, as a fan of the industry, but as, again, one of us who is just kind of one of us, who's this, enthusiast, but, it's cool to just hang out and talk to us on podcast and kind of be that face of the Zamperla coaster revolution. So thank you so much for joining us on the Coaster 101 podcast, and hope you have a great IAAPA Expo and sell literally everything you need to sell and want to sell and more. So
thanks so much. And thank you very much for having us on. We do appreciate Coaster 101. You guys are always being really nice, sharing our stuff on social, giving us a platform here to talk about what we're doing. And, the feeling is mutual. And we just really do appreciate kind of as we started, our social channels in March of 2021 with 0 listeners, and now I've kind of cranked those up. So it's been a journey, and we're really just getting started on the exciting things we're going to announce. So we appreciate, you guys jumping on and being supporters early on.
Absolutely. And for those who would like to follow you, obviously follow Zamperla Coasters on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. It's 2 of the 3. I never remember which 2.
So Zamperla Rides, the mothership, if you will, available on pretty much any platform you can think of. I don't think we're on TikTok yet, but pretty much everywhere else. Zamperla Coasters, we're on Facebook and Instagram at Zamperla Coasters. And then if you just like nerdy shots of roller coasters as well as nerdy shots of history stuff, follow me at Roller Coaster Sales Guy on Instagram. So
I love it. And then there's the occasional picture of your dog, who we've somehow made it 45 minutes and have not mentioned. So I hope Bunk is doing well.
Bunk is sleeping next to me. He's kind of staring at me because I mentioned his name, but he's doing great, and he enjoys hanging out with me pretty much every day I'm not traveling. So it's nice to have a buddy.
I love it. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. After you follow Zamperla Rides and Zamperla Coasters on all forms of social media, make sure you do the same to Coaster 101. We're everywhere, just like Zamperla Rides is: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are on TikTok. We're too old to know how to use it, but we do have it. Also, Coaster101.com. You'll see, if you go type Zamperla in the search bar, you're going to find a lot of really good stuff about their new models, but just give it a search, Coaster101.com, check that out. If you're listening, make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, leaving 5-star reviews on Spotify and iTunes, because that helps us get more listeners, which helps us get great guests like Adam. So thanks as always to Justin Mabry for our theme music, and we will talk to y'all again soon. See ya.